Welcome to our channel of suspense and scary excitement. Today's episode is about 4 scary stories about cartoons for children. 1. The Midnight Channel 2. The Haunted Animation Studio 3. The Laughing Clown Cartoon 4. The Lost Episode Curse. Max always looked forward to Friday nights. It was the one time each week when he and his best friends, Alex, Zoe and Liam, could stay up late, camp out in the living room, and binge-watch their favorite cartoons. They'd spend hours laughing at slapstick gags, munching on popcorn, and debating which animated hero was the coolest. In their small, quiet town, these moments were the highlight of their week. But one Friday night, everything changed. It all started when Max's grandmother gave him an old, boxy television. The screen was small, the knobs were worn, and the wood-paneled casing looked straight out of the 1970s. "Still works like a charm," she told Max with a mysterious smile. "But there's one thing you should know. This TV, it only turns on after midnight." Max chuckled, assuming it was just one of his grandma's odd jokes. He dragged the heavy TV home, eager to show his friends. That Friday night, as usual, the gang gathered at his house for their sleepover. The old TV sat in the corner of the room, a relic overshadowed by Max's sleek flat screen. "What's with the ancient TV?" Alex asked, poking at the dusty knobs. "It's my grandma's," Max explained. "She said it only works after midnight. Creepy, right?" "Sounds like a horror movie setup," Zoe teased, tossing a handful of popcorn into her mouth. "Let's try it," Liam said, always up for something weird. "What's the worst that could happen?" They spent the evening watching their usual lineup of cartoons on the flat screen. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the group grew more curious about the old TV. When the digital clock on the wall blinked to 12 o'clock, Max turned the knob on the antique set. The screen flickered to life. At first, the picture was grainy, the sound warped and crackling. But then, the static cleared, and a cartoon began to play. The animation was bright and colorful, almost hypnotic. It showed a group of anthropomorphic animals, a fox, a bear, a rabbit, and a raccoon, dancing in a meadow. Their movements were smooth but slightly off, like marionettes being controlled by invisible strings. "This is so weird," Zoe muttered, leaning closer. "What channel is this?" "There's no number," Max said, frowning. "It's just on." The cartoon characters suddenly stopped dancing and turned toward the screen. For a moment, it felt like they were staring directly at the kids. Did they just look at us?" Alex asked, his voice uneasy. "No way," Liam said, though his grin faltered. "It's just a cartoon, it's not real." But then the fox waved, its paw moving in slow, deliberate arcs. And as the group sat frozen, a voice crackled through the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. "Hello, Max." The room fell silent. Max's heart pounded in his chest. "Did that thing just say my name?" "Turn it off," Zoe said immediately, her eyes wide. Max scrambled to twist the knob, but the TV wouldn't respond. The cartoon continued playing, the characters now speaking in soft, eerie whispers that seemed to fill the room. "Max," the rabbit said, its painted-on smile stretching unnaturally wide. "Aren't you going to watch?" "This isn't funny anymore," Alex said, standing up. He yanked the TV's plug from the wall and the screen went black. The kids exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. "Maybe it's just a glitch," Liam said, though his voice wavered. "Old TVs do weird stuff, right?" "Right," Max said, trying to convince himself. But as they settled back into their sleeping bags, none of them could shake the feeling that the cartoon had been watching them just as much as they had been watching it. The next night, Max's curiosity got the better of him. After his friends went home, he stayed up late and turned on the old TV. At exactly midnight, the screen lit up again. This time, the cartoon showed the same characters sitting around a campfire. They didn't speak, but their eyes seemed to follow Max wherever he moved. "Who are you?" Max whispered, as if the characters could hear him. To his horror, the fox leaned closer to the screen and said, "We're your friends, Max. Come play with us." Max stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. He turned the TV off and threw a blanket over it, but he couldn't sleep. The fox's voice echoed in his mind. The following Friday, Max told his friends what had happened. Though they were skeptical, the allure of the strange TV was too strong to resist. That night they gathered again, determined to figure out the mystery of the Midnight Channel. At midnight the cartoon returned, but this time it was different. The characters were no longer in their cheerful meadow. Instead, they stood in a dark forest, their cartoonish features more twisted and menacing. "Welcome back," the bear rumbled, its voice low and gravelly. "We've been waiting for you." "What do you want?" Zoe demanded, her voice trembling. The raccoon giggled, a high-pitched mechanical sound. "We want to play a game. Come closer." Against their better judgment, the kids edged toward the TV. Suddenly, the screen flickered and a surge of static electricity filled the room. Before they could react, a blinding light erupted from the screen, and the kids were pulled into the TV. Max opened his eyes and found himself standing in the cartoon world. The colors were oversaturated, the air thick and heavy. The ground beneath his feet felt soft and springy, like a bouncy castle. His friends stood nearby, their faces pale with fear. "Where are we?" Alex asked, his voice shaking. "In their world," Max said grimly. "The cartoon." The fox appeared, its once cheerful face now warped into a sinister grin. "Welcome to our playground," it said. "If you want to leave, you'll have to win our game." "What game?" Liam demanded. The bear stepped forward, holding a giant stopwatch. "You have until this clock runs out to find the portal back to your world. But be warned, we'll be hunting you." The stopwatch started ticking, and the kids bolted into the forest. The once innocent trees now loomed tall and menacing, their branches twisting like claws. The ground shifted beneath their feet, forcing them to keep moving. The kids navigated the surreal landscape, encountering bizarre obstacles. Rivers of ink flowed through the forest, and bridges dissolved as soon as they stepped on them. Giant pencils fell from the sky, their sharpened tips narrowly missing the group. "We need to stick together," Max said, trying to stay calm. "If we find the portal, we can get out of here." But the cartoon characters were relentless. The fox appeared in the shadows, its glowing eyes tracking their every move. The rabbit's laughter echoed through the trees, and the bear's heavy footsteps shook the ground. "Over here!" Zoe shouted, pointing to a clearing ahead. In the center of the clearing stood a glowing portal, its swirling light a beacon of hope. The kids sprinted toward it, but the cartoon villains closed in. It all started with a school field trip to Winslow Animation Studios, a decrepit old building on the edge of town. The studio had been abandoned for decades, its windows boarded up, and its once vibrant murals of cartoon characters faded into eerie, ghostly outlines. The air of mystery surrounding it made it the perfect subject for local legends. Stories of animators who vanished, whispers of cursed cartoons, and a rumor that the studio's last project was so horrifying it was never completed. For Ella, Tyler, Mia, and Sam, the trip was supposed to be just another boring school outing. But from the moment their bus pulled up to the sagging gates, Ella felt a chill crawl up her spine. The rusted sign above the entrance creaked in the wind, and the faint smell of mildew wafted from the cracked walls. Something about the place felt wrong. Why would they even bring us here? Ella susurró a Tyler, mientras su clase salía del autobús. Probably to scare us, Tyler replied with a shrug, though his eyes betrayed unease. You know how teachers love making us learn stuff. Their guide was a wiry man named Mr. Grayson, who claimed to be an archivist of animation history. His thin smile never quite reached his eyes, and his voice had a faint, sing-song quality that made Ella's skin crawl. Welcome to Winslow Animation Studios, Mr. Grayson said, gesturing dramatically to the building. This was once a place of dreams, where animators brought colorful characters to life. But like all dreams, some can become nightmares. The class laughed nervously, but Ella's unease deepened. She stuck close to Mia and Sam as they entered the studio, the smell of dust and decay hitting them like a wave. Inside, the studio was a maze of dark hallways, peeling wallpaper, and forgotten relics of a bygone era. Old animation desks littered with yellowed sketches and jars of dried-out paint were scattered about. A projector sat in one corner, its film reel coated in cobwebs. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, curiosity got the better of the group. As Mr. Grayson droned on about Winslow's glory days, Ella's attention was drawn to a locked door at the end of a narrow hallway. Unlike the other doors, which hung loosely on their hinges, this one was pristine. Its brass handle gleamed, and a small plaque above it read, Studio 13. "Hey, check this out," she whispered, nudging her friends. The four of them hung back as the rest of the class moved on. "Do you think there's something in there?" Sam asked, his voice low. "Only one way to find out," Tyler said, trying to sound brave. He reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Figures Mia leaned in, her sharp eyes catching something the others missed. "There's a keyhole, maybe we can—" Before she could finish, the door creaked open on its own. The group froze, exchanging nervous glances. "That's not creepy at all," Sam muttered. "We're already here," Tyler said, stepping inside. "Might as well look around." Studio 13 was unlike anything they'd seen. The walls were covered in sketches and storyboards, each more unsettling than the last. Grotesque creatures with twisted limbs, shadowy figures with hollow eyes, and jagged landscapes dominated the pages. In the center of the room stood an animation table with a stack of cells, the transparent sheets animators used to create cartoons. Next to it, an old projector sat humming softly, though no one had turned it on. "This is insane," Mia said, flipping through the sketches. "Why would anyone draw this stuff?" "Maybe it's part of that cursed cartoon everyone talks about," Tyler said, "the one they never finished." "The one that drove the animators crazy," Sam added, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. "I heard they just disappeared." Ella's gaze fell on the projector. Something about it seemed to pull her in, as if it were beckoning her to turn it on. Against her better judgment, she reached for the switch. "Ella, don't," Mia warned. "I just want to see what's on it," Ella said. The projector whirred to life, casting flickering light onto the far wall. A cartoon began to play, its imagery crude and chaotic. The same grotesque characters from the sketches appeared, their movements jerky and unnatural. The sound was a discordant mix of laughter, screams, and faint whispers. Then the characters stopped moving. Slowly, they turned to face the camera, their hollow eyes staring directly at the group. "Get out!" a voice growled from the speakers, deep and distorted. The projector shut off, plunging the room into darkness. The door to Studio 13 slammed shut, and the air grew cold. Ella fumbled for her phone's flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. The sketches on the walls seemed to move in the corner of her eye, their lines shifting and twisting. "What just happened?" Tyler asked, his voice tight with panic. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Ella said, her heart racing. She tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked." "No way," Sam said, pulling at the handle. "It was open a second ago." A faint scratching sound filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. The group turned to see the sketches on the walls coming to life. The grotesque creatures peeled themselves off the paper, their bodies stretching and distorting as they stepped into the room. "Run!" Mia screamed. The kids darted around the room, dodging the creatures as they advanced. One of them, a shadowy figure with elongated arms, swiped at Tyler, narrowly missing him. Another, a grotesque clown with a jagged grin, let out a high-pitched cackle as it lunged for Sam. Ella's flashlight beam landed on the stack of cells at the animation table. An idea struck her. "The projector!" she shouted. "We need to use it!" "Are you crazy?" Tyler yelled. "That thing's what started this. Just trust me." Ella grabbed the cells and fed them into the projector. The machine sputtered to life, casting a new cartoon onto the wall. This one showed a bright, swirling portal. "That's our way out," Ella Diho. "We have to get to the portal." The creatures screamed in rage as the kids sprinted toward the wall. The portal's swirling light grew brighter, its pull growing stronger. One by one, the kids jumped through, the world around them dissolving into chaos. Ella was the last to leap. As she turned back, she saw the grotesque clown reaching for her, its jagged grin inches away. With a final burst of courage, she threw herself into the portal. The kids tumbled onto the floor of the studio's main hallway, the sound of the portal's hum fading behind them. Studio 13 was silent once more, the door slightly ajar. "What just happened?" Mia asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Ella said, catching her breath. "But we're never coming back here." The group hurried to rejoin their class, their hearts still racing. As they boarded the bus, Ella glanced back at the studio. The door to Studio 13 creaked shut, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw the grotesque clown watching them from the window, its jagged grin unchanged. The end. Ella had always loved cartoons. Growing up, Saturday mornings were her favorite time of the week. She'd sit cross-legged in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal, watching the colorful adventures of her favorite characters. One cartoon held a special place in her heart: Jester Jiggles, the story of a laughing clown who spread joy with his ridiculous antics and contagious giggle. But as she grew older, Ella left Jester Jiggles behind, chalking it up to a silly part of her childhood, until the strange tape arrived. It was a drizzly Friday evening when Ella's mom called her down to the kitchen. On the counter sat a small cardboard box, unmarked except for Ella's name, scribbled in uneven handwriting. No return address. Ella tore it open and found a dusty VHS tape inside. Its label was handwritten. The words, "Jester Jiggles, Special Episode," barely legible. "Where did this come from?" Ella asked, turning the tape over in her hands. Her mum shrugged. "No idea, it was in the mailbox." Ella's stomach fluttered with unease. The tape looked ancient, and VHS tapes were a thing of the past. She hadn't even thought about Jester Jiggles in years. Who would send this to her? Curiosity won out. Ella retrieved the old VCR from the attic, dusted it off, and plugged it into the TV in her room. She pushed the tape in, the familiar whirring sound of the machine bringing a rush of nostalgia. The screen flickered to life. The episode began like any other, Jester Jiggles skipping through a sunny town square, his oversized shoes squeaking and his high-pitched laughter echoing. Ella sonrió a pesar de sí misma. She remembered every detail of the show, the clown's polka-dotted hat, the way he juggled pies, and the little bounce in his step. But something was different. The colors were muted, and the animation seemed off. Jester's movements were jerky, and his eyes lingered on the screen longer than they should. His laugh, once warm and infectious, now had an unsettling edge. The background music, normally cheerful and bouncy, was slower, almost like a music box winding down. Ella's fingers hovered over the remote. She considered stopping the tape, but curiosity kept her glued to the screen. As the episode progressed, Jester stopped his antics and stared directly at the camera. His grin widened unnaturally, stretching from ear to ear. "Hello, Ella," he said, his voice distorted. Ella's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled with the remote, but the buttons didn't respond. The TV screen crackled, and Jester's grin grew wider. "Do you want to laugh with me?" he asked, tilting his head. His giggle now sounded like nails scraping against glass. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The only light came from the TV, where Jester Jiggles began to move toward the screen. His body twisted unnaturally, his limbs bending at impossible angles. "Don't stop watching, Ella," he crooned. "I've been waiting for you." Ella screamed and yanked the tape from the VCR. The TV went black, and the room fell silent. Her heart raced as she stared at the tape in her trembling hands. She wanted to throw it out, to burn it, but something stopped her. Instead, she shoved it into a drawer and slammed it shut. That night, Ella dreamed of Jester Jiggles. He stood in a darkened carnival, his silhouette illuminated by flickering neon lights. His laugh echoed through the empty fairgrounds as he juggled severed heads instead of pies. When he turned to face her, his hollow eyes locked onto hers. "You can't hide from me," he whispered. Ella woke in a cold sweat, the sound of his laughter still ringing in her ears. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. The TV in Ella's room turned on by itself, always showing static. At school, she found drawings of Jester Jiggles scrawled in the margins of her notebooks, though she didn't remember making them. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, accompanied by faint giggling. Ella confided in her best friends, Claire and Nate. "I think the tape, it's cursed or something," she said, her voice shaking. "He knows my name. He's in my dreams." Nate, always the skeptic, snorted. "It's probably some prank. Someone's messing with you." "It's not a prank," Ella snapped. "I'll prove it to you. Come over tonight. We'll watch it together." That evening, the three of them gathered in Ella's room. She hesitated before pushing the tape into the VCR. "Just don't laugh, no matter what," she warned. "What do you mean, don't laugh?" Claire asked, frowning. I think it's how he gets to you," Ella said. "If you laugh, you're his." Nate rolled his eyes. "You've been watching too many horror movies." The tape began to play. Once again, Jester Jiggles appeared on the screen, skipping through the muted town square. But this time, the animation deteriorated faster. His face twisted into grotesque shapes, his laughter growing louder and more distorted. "Hello, Ella," Jester said, his voice cutting through the static. "And welcome, Claire and Nate. I'm so glad you could join us." The friends froze. Claire's face went pale, and even Nate looked uneasy. Jester leaned closer to the screen. "Let's play a game. If you can keep a straight face, I'll let you go. But if you laugh, well, you'll see." Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, and the air grew cold. Jester stepped out of the TV, his body elongating as he emerged. His oversized shoes thudded against the floor, and his laughter filled the room. "Don't laugh," Ella whispered, clutching Claire's arm. Jester began his performance. He juggled burning bowling pins, balancing on one foot while his head spun in circles. The absurdity of it all made Nate snort involuntarily. Jester's head snapped toward him. "Ah, we have a winner," he said, his grin widening. Nate's laughter turned into a scream as Jester lunged at him. In an instant, Nate was gone, his body dissolving into static. The TV crackled, and his face appeared on the screen, his expression frozen in terror. "Now, who's next?" Jester cooed, turning to Ella and Claire. Ella grabbed the tape and hurled it at Jester. To her surprise, it struck him, and he let out a distorted shriek. The room shook as the TV screen began to warp, pulling Jester back toward it like a vortex. "The tape! Destroy the tape!" Ella gritto. Claire grabbed a nearby pair of scissors and began hacking at the tape. With each cut, Jester's body flickered, his laughter growing weaker. Finally, with one last snip, the tape split in two. Jester let out a final, guttural scream as he was sucked back into the TV. The screen shattered and the room fell silent. Ella and Claire stared at the broken TV, their breaths heavy. Nate's face was gone from the screen, but so was he. Tears streamed down Ella's face. "What are we doing now?" Claire whispered. Ella picked up the remnants of Thestry and said, "We make sure no one else finds anything like this again." The horrifying tale of the laughing clown had ended, but its shadow lingered in their lives forever. It started like any other lazy Saturday for siblings Mia and Jake. Rain pattered against their bedroom windows, trapping them inside. Mia, a 14-year-old with a love for mysteries, sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through conspiracy forums on her laptop. Jake, her 11-year-old brother, was sprawled out on the floor, flipping through old comic books. Their boredom came to an abrupt end when Jake stumbled across a dusty VHS tape hidden in a box in the attic. The label was worn, the faded handwriting barely legible. Sunny Days, Episode 18, Lost. Sunny Days was an old cartoon they had both adored as kids, full of cheerful songs, bright colors, and talking animal friends. But neither of them remembered an episode 18. "I thought there were only 17 episodes, Mia said, examining the tape. "Yeah, the finale was that one where they fixed the Rainbow Bridge," Jake added. So, what's this? Mia's curiosity got the better of her. Let's find out. They dug out an old VCR from the closet, set it up in their room, and slid the tape in. As the static on the TV gave way to the cartoon, they settled in to watch. The episode began like any other Sunny Days adventure. The familiar characters appeared: Benny the bunny, Lucy the lamb, and Felix the fox, all smiling and singing as they walked through their sunny meadow. But something felt off. The colors were duller, the animation jittery as if it hadn't been finished. The music, usually cheerful and upbeat, was slow and slightly out of tune. This is weird, Jake muttered. Just watch, Mia said, though she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The characters soon arrived at a cave, a location that had never appeared in the series before. Benny turned to the screen and said, "Do you want to see what's inside? Come closer." Jake chuckled nervously. "Why is he talking to us?" "He's breaking the fourth wall," Mia said, trying to sound dismissive, but her voice wavered. The characters stepped into the cave, and the screen flickered. When the image returned, the once friendly characters looked different. Their eyes were too big, their grins too wide. The cheerful music had been replaced by faint whispers and static. "Something's not right," Mia said, reaching for the remote. But no matter how many buttons she pressed, the TV wouldn't respond. On screen, Lucy the lamb turned to the camera, her black eyes gleaming. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. The screen went black. For a moment, Mia and Jake sat frozen. Then, without warning, the TV turned back on. This time, the cartoon characters were gone, replaced by grainy footage of their own living room. "What the—" Jake whispered, his voice trembling. The camera view on the screen began to move, panning toward their bedroom door. The siblings turned to look, half expecting someone to burst in, but the hallway was empty. When they looked back at the TV, the camera was now inside their room, showing the two of them sitting on the bed. "Turn it off!" Jake yelled, but the power button did nothing. The screen flickered again, and Benny the bunny reappeared. His fur was matted, his eyes hollow. "You shouldn't have watched," he said, his voice distorted. "Now you're part of the show." The room plunged into darkness. The siblings' screams were swallowed by the silence as a cold wind whipped through the room. When the lights flickered back on, the TV was off and the tape was gone. In its place was a note scrawled in red ink. "One of you must stay." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Mia could answer, the TV turned on again by itself. This time, the screen showed a timer counting down from 5 minutes. "We have to do something," Mia said, her mind racing. Let's get rid of the VCR." The two of them yanked the machine from the wall and ran downstairs. They opened the front door to throw it outside, but stopped short. Standing in their front yard were the Sunny Days characters, their distorted faces grinning at them through the rain. "No way," Jake breathed, backing up. The characters stepped closer, their movements jerky and unnatural. Benny raised a hand and pointed at Mia. "It's your turn," he said. "Run!" Mia screamed, dragging Jake back inside. They slammed the door and locked it, but the creatures began pounding on the windows, their laughter echoing through the house. The siblings barricaded themselves in the basement. Mia frantically searched for anything they could use to stop whatever was happening. "We'll break the tape," she said. "The tape's gone," Jake shouted. "Then the VCR," Mia insisted. She grabbed a hammer from a toolbox and smashed the machine into pieces. But the laughter didn't stop. Instead, it grew louder, closer. "It's not working," Jake whimpered, tears streaming down his face. The lights flickered again, and the Sunny Days characters appeared at the top of the basement stairs. Benny, Lucy, and Felix grinned down at them, their heads tilting unnaturally. "One of you must stay," Benny repeated. "Why?" Mia demanded, standing protectively in front of her brother. "What do you want?" Benny's hollow eyes locked onto hers. "A trade," he said. "One of you stays with us, and we let the other go." "Never!" Mia shouted. The characters began descending the stairs, their laughter echoing in the confined space. Mia grabbed Jake's hand and pulled him toward the far corner of the basement, where an old mirror leaned against the wall. "Jake, listen to me," she said, her voice trembling. "No matter what happens, don't look away from the mirror, do you understand?" Jake nodded, his eyes wide with fear. Mia turned to face the advancing characters, her heart pounding. She picked up the hammer, gripping it tightly. Benny reached for her, his elongated fingers inches from her face. In a desperate move, Mia swung the hammer, shattering the mirror behind her. The glass exploded, and for a moment, the room was filled with blinding light. The Sunny Days characters let out piercing screams as they dissolved into shadows, their forms twisting and collapsing into the shards of glass. When the light faded, the basement was silent. The characters were gone, and the broken mirror lay in pieces on the floor. Mia and Jake stumbled upstairs, their legs weak. The VCR and the TV were gone, as if they had never existed. The rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows. "Is it over?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia hugged him tightly. "I think so." But as they stood there, Mia noticed something on the living room floor. It was a single shard of glass from the broken mirror. Reflected in its surface was Benny the bunny, his grin wider than ever. The end.